Hello, Luke. Welcome back. I'm glad to talk more Gemmo talk with you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm always keen to learn and just, especially from yourself and especially about Gemmos. Thank you.
Great, Luke. Well, when we spoke last, we were talking about Gemmos for the central nervous system. We were talking about how they're best taken first thing in the morning because they're supporting the way our body takes in sensory information and whether it's seeing that sensory information as a threat or safe. And we looked at two of the first states, and one of them was fear, and one of them was fragility. And the extracts were black poplar and dog rose. Today, I'm going to take you through the other four. And so, this first state is looking at the world through a state of shielding. And got a great picture here of this woman looking out at the world, but she is behind a window pane, right? And so she can see everything, but she's kept herself protected. And this state is one where we have a strong need to protect ourselves, especially from the energy of others. And we feel safest in a controlled environment. The coping mechanism is isolation. We saw a lot of this, Luke, during COVID, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was a huge theme. Is this a state that resonates with you?
Well, yeah, I suppose. It's for me, it's not so much about, I don't think it's about safety. Not consciously, maybe unconsciously it is, but it's about being able to tap into creative processes. I need to be in isolation. Um, and maybe that is an element of how I feel safe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because to be creative, we have to feel safe. So those two things go hand in hand. I know for myself, sometimes I just go through phases where I'm just pulling away, um, and yes, those can be very creative times. But it's also a time that I definitely feel more myself when I'm in a controlled environment.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sometimes we come into this place when we've had a shock or we've had a loss. It may not be that acute state like the fragility or the fear that we saw with black poplar and dog rose, and it often is the next state, right? So we don't feel like we're going to fall apart, but we're also not ready to engage.
Yeah. Mm.
So the picture of this state, to go into a little more explanation, is that yes, we feel safest often at home and often alone, but we can also deal with the folks that reside within our home, different than being out and about in social environments. We also can get ourselves into a place, if we stay in that state chronically, to get stuck emotionally. We're not really willing to take the next step forward. There's a bit of third chakra weakness here. We'll see on the physical plane a vulnerability about this sense of self, autonomy, and confidence. That's probably bringing up some human design
Mm.
thoughts there for you,
Mm.
and a challenged, feeling challenged in the ability to remain sovereign in relationship. So we might start losing ourselves, say, in a marriage or in a relationship with a colleague or our boss or even a mentor of some kind. And there's
Mhm.
a sense of just retreating from the flow of life. We're pulling off. So if life is a river flowing, we're kind of pulling off and the side there and letting the current pass us, in order to protect ourselves.
Mm. Interesting. And I only, which is the third chakra in human design terms? Is that the throat or is that coming up from the base?
Coming up from the base.
Coming up from the base. So that would be the solar plexus, would it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's where, if that's not defined, right, we may
Hmm.
feel, or if there's some weakness there for some other reasons, we may feel that. I think this is an extract certain people gravitate towards more than others. Um, but I think there is also a time in our life where we can all benefit from this. We may go through a particular stage. What I've seen this extract be able to do, which is walnut, is bring people back to that place where they can venture out again and feel like they can get back into the stream and flow of their life and be able to hold on to that autonomy in when they're in relationship and kind of leaning into life. I've also known this extract to be one we could stay on for long periods of time.
It's interesting because I do have undefined solar plexus, and basically you do need time to yourself because otherwise you're constantly reflecting and amplifying other people's emotions without really realizing it until you get to something like human design, and then you say, oh hey, what that's one of, it's one of the skills that can make you good at being in the healing arts, because you've got that, that openness and that unprejudiced ability to perceive emotions. But you need that time to yourself to like process and not feel other people's emotions. And yeah, and it basically, your emotions come up as a surprise when you're around other people's emotions. You're like, oh God, I didn't realize I had that emotion, and it comes up, and you're not expecting it. So that can make you feel vulnerable. And also that you want to solve other people's emotional waves so that you get less affected by them. So you're like, oh, I know that if this happens, they're going to go here, and I'll feel really unsafe when they go there. So I'll try and make sure that doesn't happen. Um, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, a bit of control there.
Mm.
So the what I've seen that this extract does is take it, it doesn't change that characteristic, but it allows you to hold on to your strength and energy for longer periods of time.
Okay.
So when you're in relationship with others and in um, social settings, that they don't drain you to the degree. And I'm sure you've recognized with that um, undefined solar plexus, there are times you have more resiliency to be with others, and there are times that you don't, right?
Mm.
So this would be an interesting um, experiment for you, is when you feel yourself pulling away, to take walnut for a period of time and see what it offers you.
Mm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So walnut, we know, loves to grow alone. It actually loves to grow alone, so much so that in its design, it produces juglans that and drops it through its leaves and prevents other plants from growing underneath its base. So what what I have found with walnut is not only does it help us feel stronger in being with others, but also not feeling like we need that. The protection can be there to build our resilience, but we can go back into the game more with ease.
Mm.
Um, Great, beautiful, strong tree growing 300 to 400 years at a length. It desires full sun. It doesn't have a deep, deep root system, though. The roots are very superficial. And
Mm.
so I think that is also something to consider when we're thinking about who needs that, right? And when when we don't have that deep rooted strength, we might be looking to walnut for some support.
Interesting.
Walnut in the nervous system state, when we're looking just at taking it in a microdose, it is a harmonizer for the central nervous system, but it does a lot of other amazing things when we're taking it in a higher dose. It has a tonic action on the mucosal level, resolving infectious states. It stimulates the pancreas, so it's very helpful for folks diagnosed with type 2 diabetes to stay off medication and use walnut in place of that. It has a harmonizing action on the thyroid. It can be taken for children from birth for short periods of time, not for long periods, but after 12 months and older, it can be taken more frequently with children just because of its strong tonic action on the mucosal level. We don't want to give it on a regular basis to children under a year.
Right.
Any
Right.
questions on that?
I was looking up we talked about Jan
Yeah,
Scholten's plant
yeah,
system.
tell me.
I was looking at its position, and it's part of um the Fabidae group, so it's related to the oak family in that sense. But it's yeah, the oaks and beech are like right in the middle, which in his system is phase 4, and walnut is phase 5. So in terms of how they feel in the group, they're not as central, and they want something more from the group. And they feel like there's more to life than just being in the center position. And the trigram that I would associate with that is wind in the I Ching. So it's like that moving away, that dispersing sort of energy is there.
Beautiful. Wow, that really enriches my picture of walnut for sure. And it aligns quite well. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
look at this next state. So this is coming from an unrooted state when we are highly sensitive to the emotions of others, challenged by their sense of, you become challenged by your sense of self and relationship. This is much more extreme than walnut. Um, the coping strategy is really interesting for these individuals. They really tend to gravitate towards sugary substances because people wear them out, they wear themselves out. And they also tend to draw in a collection of individuals in worse shape than themselves. And that's how they cope with feeling unrooted. That gives them some power back, that I'm taking care of these other folk
Mm,
in their picture. And this is oats that we're talking about, and you can see these beautiful deep root oats. We grow oats out in the Gemmo forest as a cover crop to help build root systems in the soil and to protect it from erosion. So this individual has an inability to access or receive nourishment. And for practitioners, this is something really easy to listen for in your inquiry, because these are people that will skip meals, that will rush through. Oh, I'll just grab something to eat. I won't, um, spend any
mm,
time preparing something. But also nourishment from other sources, right? Nourishment isn't just from food, and whether they're taking time for their spirituality in the morning, or just whatever it is that feed them. Folks in this state often can't even identify what would feed or nourish them on an extreme end. There's a lack of mothering and a lack of mothering energy, ability to mother themselves, right? We also may tend to fall into an oat state more often if we've never been mothered and never been nurtured.
mm, mm,
Um, there's the lack of roots and ability to engage, because we can't put our roots down. If you've ever watched a field of oats, right, they move in such a beautiful way in the wind. They have each other, they're all supported. And that's what you want. That's what you're looking for, that support, but it's just not there for you. So you reach for sugary things to keep you going. And in the meantime, you're also challenged by maintaining boundaries. Oats also has a similar action as a plant as walnut does in preventing other plants from growing around it. And so again, this is a boundary remedy. And so I think if I look to walnut and oats, oats would be more extreme in all of these cases. Walnut not as acute, might be more of a chronic situation. How's this landing, Luke?
Yeah, that makes sense, but partly because you basically think of tree, yeah, in general, trees more chronic, more stability, longer lifespan, whereas oats is a monocot, part of the Lilidae, and yeah, more there would be more of an acute picture. It's very similar to the homeopathic picture of oats that we have. Um, that comes from there's a meditative proving done in England of oats. I think is there a bark flower for oat as well?
No, but I mean, Avena sativa is often taken as an herbal extract, right?
It's well known, isn't it, for that sort of calming
Mm-hmm.
effect. But this whole group, the Poaceae, in homeopathy is sort of known for covering these food addiction things. So wheat, oat, bamboo is a remedy part of that group that feels that lack of support and has the signature of the spine in its in how it grows and how it looks. It's got the
Yeah.
vertebral links there, so it's a remedy for that lack of support and how that affects the lower back, especially.
Well, think too of how these all grow tight together as well, right? That so they're plants that grow in community. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just try to keep bamboo from not spreading, right? That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
that's
Yeah,
hard.
really fascinating comparison there.
And they thrive. So the grasses and grains thrived at the same time as the mammals, which also have that issue of like needing the family, needing support, being in the group, especially the herding um, mammals. So agriculture and grain and all of that history of humanity and that evolution of the mammals. It's kind of you can link it all in that way.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at the materia medica here, or the plant itself, excuse me. So, right, we've got this rapid growth. It suppresses weeds, prevents erosion. It does prevent the growth of other plants, which is why it's often used as a cover crop. Um, it can handle drought conditions and nutritionally poor soils and wastelands. I would almost say this is very similar to our pioneer trees because oats is something you would put in to nurse a field to health, right? So again, following up with that state, that depleted state, oats is very useful there. Um, I want to talk a little bit about it on the materia medica level because one of the things that oats does is it has an adaptogen effect. And we have three extracts for the nervous system that have this adaptogenic effect. And I think we need to consider those at all times when someone is in a state of crisis, whatever the cause of that is. And that's oats. And that would be your first response. It is a slow acting extract, though. It's not something that takes you from 0 to 100 quickly, but it gives that base and staying power and gives the energy that's needed to prevent that falling from the earth kind of feeling one gets when everything comes crashing in. The other extract that it has an adaptogen effect is blackthorn, and we use that more as a tonic and an organizer later on when we're building a nervous system protocol. Again, helping in that time of crisis, that long, especially things that we know are going to last for a long period, like caring for a dying partner or parent, or making a change in job that will the change will cause a lot of intensity for a period of time. And then the third one is silver birch seed, and that is a direct brain food when we are being mentally and emotionally challenged by circumstances, working much different than any of the other tonics for the brain. It is nutrition for the brain. So those three are important to have in your pocket. I think particularly as a practitioner in cases, and there are times that all three could be used very well together.
Okay.
Yeah, so oats, unlike any of the other extracts we've talked about so far, actually comes in with a bonus of harmonizing the central and the autonomic nervous system. And also, they're both its primary actions. We only, in my system with Gemmos, only use oats in a microdose for the nervous system, although it can be used in higher doses to harmonize the endocrine system. And some folks work with it that way in chemotherapy, but we find some other extracts to be more effective than oats is. And it could be used for children from age of 12 months.
Supple. Yes.
Okay, well, let's look at another plant since we're talking about plants over trees, and that is this extract that I'm going to be talking about is hops. Hops supports from a state of avoidance. So we can avoid life and our emotions in many different forms, and we are all on that continuum from whether we're actually addicted or we're controlled by the substance, or we just keep reaching for that phone, and we can all argue whether we're addicted or not. But what we know about this state is this individual often has difficulty expressing how they feel because they don't know how they feel. It's been so suppressed. And when it's chronic, it's been suppressed for a long time. This is an excellent extract to consider for this state in the immediacy. It's very good for acute, but it can also be circled back around later on. And I'll explain why I see that. The coping strategy is to use something, whether that's alcohol or you're smoking, or you're using your technology, or whatever that is in your life, to avoid having that feeling. And usually that feeling is something's missing in my life, right? I find this to be an extremely difficult extract to self-diagnose with. But I think once someone uses it and begins to build that relationship, their awareness around this issue for themselves, because if we're disconnected, we don't have any awareness. And so that's very difficult to expect someone that's feeling disconnected or unplugged with themselves to even get to that point. I wanted to get to the state here. The state is often felt with this disassociation in the body. And sometimes folks can say, like, my head doesn't feel connected, right, to my body. There's this disconnect. There's a loss of emotional control, and it's suppressed through substances. But when it's not being suppressed through a substance, we'll see this roller coaster, and it can be outbursts and or crying jags or whatever that tends to be. There's an inability to be still, and being on your phone on the sofa is also not being still, right? We're in some form of movement, um, because there's a lack of safety and stillness. And there is this perpetual inner noise and motion that is created so that the feelings can't be felt. Any thoughts on that one, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it's the same botanical family as cannabis. Cannabis
Yeah, it
indica
is.
has this symptom of the vertex opening and closing, or being ungrounded, lifting out of the body, and and obviously I can imagine cannabis would be one of the things that is used to,
Sure.
you know, it can make you feel temporarily like you're more connected, but overall, you know, the you know there's this primary and secondary action with any, especially a plant. So the primary action of cannabis may be to feel more connected and more social, but the secondary action is that, you know, that isolation and avoidance becomes stronger, and you end up using the drug more. And it'd be interesting to see if you know, a drink with hops in it but no yeast and no alcohol would have the same similar effect as beer. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, that would be interesting. But as you were speaking about cannabis, we've had many practitioners use this for folks hoping to stop a habitual pattern there, and it's been quite useful.
yeah, yes, yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So it I'm having a hard time switching back on my screen here to go back a step, but to the growth of the plant, though, this is one thing that's really interesting about hops and fits the state so well. And if anyone's seen it growing, hops has to be supported. And it has to be supported by a really strong structure, right? And the more it grows, the more weight it has. And it can knock down fences, it can knock down a side of a barn. Um, so it's just an interesting thought of this need to be supported by a substance of some kind that's holding that up. The other thing is hops has two types of roots. It has a very deep root, and it has also a surface set of roots. And that indicates to me that it can be useful both in the acute state and in a deeper level, coming back again, working a little bit with the chronic state. And we've seen that in practice.
Mm. How does this loss of emotional control manifest typically?
Like like I'm a crying jag, or and not being able to stop, or getting in a rage and not being able to stop. Um, we have a couple extracts that we've seen work really well with particularly these rage states, and hops would be a first one, and field maple is another.
Mm. Yeah.
Let's look at the materia medica here. It has the primary action for the central nervous system. It does activate GABA receptors, which would fall in line with, I'm sure, any of the research on the cannabis family with homeopathy, I would think would also do that. It does have a sedative effect. It's a harmonizer for the autonomic nervous system, and also a harmonizer for the endocrine system. We do have to be careful with this plant because there is an estrogenic effect in taking hops, and it can increase estrogen levels.
Mm.
That would be if it's taken in a higher dose, but I think we have to observe caution with anyone with a history of estrogen dependent cancers.
Okay. Hmm. From 6 years. Yeah. Mm.
So it can be taken first thing in the morning, but often folks like to take it in the evening if sleep is an issue. And again, if folks have been using cannabis to help them sleep, this can be a particularly good replacement.
I've never understood how that works.
I
How does
don't
cannabis
either,
help
Lou.
you sleep? Certainly wouldn't help me sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, any questions on hops?
No, but I can see how it would be very useful for an abundance of patients who come to homeopathy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then we're moving into this final state that we look at for the central nervous system extracts, and this is this overextended state. And this individual is going to show up harried, resentful, they're juggling too much, um, given their resilience, and it's not their fault. Is really key to this state. Their coping mechanism is it's someone else's fault. Um,
Okay.
if my partner would just do their part, if my employer wouldn't put all this on me, if right. And so there's really operating from the state of a victim. You
Mhm.
know, this word overwhelm is a really interesting word because it means something different to everyone. And I think we have to be really careful with it because overwhelm shows up very differently in different individuals. So I purposely I've chosen the word overextended.
Mhm.
Um, but I think these key definers need to be present in that. This isn't someone that is wrung out and lost their sense of self and unrooted like an oat state. This is a very different energy you're going to come up against. The picture, there is exhaustion, there is overwhelm. The extract that we're using is white willow.
Mhm.
Um, there is a lack of peace and a restlessness. This individual can be aggressive, and I would almost say abrasive might be a better term here to keep folks away. There's a
Mhm.
little bit of a bark there. And because all this activity is and all this carrying all these other burdens is really another form of addiction, right?
Mhm.
um, so there's extreme vulnerability and an inability to self-protect. There's quite a bit of judgment of self. We know when we're judging others, that is us actually a mirror that we're judging ourselves equally harsh. There's emotions that can dam up and spew out, but mostly we're going to see this person like in our practice as everything's underneath the surface here, like we're keeping it together. And so they're not snapping in front of you. They have a very practiced presentation, but a good practitioner will pick that up. And this is also something we've seen almost across the board, necessary to see in the state. There's some high tone rigidity. So they're going to complain about tension in the shoulder, tension in the elbow or the thighs, and they're walking around with this chronic pain that nothing seems to um, release. And the reason why it's not released is because it's tightly bound in that nervous system grasp. And this is a beautiful extract to start releasing it. It works really well if someone maybe leans into something like cranial sacral work, or that's right, you're a massage therapist, Luke. I'm thinking about this. So you come across this in your practice.
Yeah, you do a lot. I mean, I haven't practiced since the lockdown actually, but
Ah, okay.
yeah, when I did practice this, yeah, that um excess tone in, hypertonicity in muscles that are typically not being used in, we're designed to move basically, and most of us don't move. So you do see that a great deal. And I found doing trigger point therapy was the best way. So you're not like, you're not going, you're not doing too much, but you're finding the exact spot and just holding the
Yeah.
pressure to allow the
Yeah.
fascia to release. And
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. There's a woman, Elaine Duncan. I don't know if you've ever come across her work, The Tao of Trauma. It's a beautiful book looking at a polyvagal theory and the result of trauma in the body through the Asian medicine lens. And
mm,
she has a whole section about this high tone rigidity. And what it is, it's a chronic state, chronic sympathetic state.
mm,
And then we just start holding it. And this has been a real eye opener for my practitioners and for myself as well, that how powerful just working with the subtle body can be. And folks, when they have this kind of pain, they want to go to a chiropractor and they want someone to adjust something and move something. And the adjustment really is much more subtle. And you tapped into it there with trigger point work, right? It's this, it's more refined than that.
there's always
Yes,
different ways in, aren't there? And
sure,
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So the white willow tree, I think, gives us a great picture of this person. If you see this blowing in the wind and everything's going, right?
Yeah.
There's, and all the leaves are going and the branches are going. There's a lot happening. And then when the wind stops, it all settles and comes together. There's some cohesion and coherence there. And so I think it depicts very beautifully both the state untreated and then the treated state.
Mm,
The willow tree is a really rapid growing tree. It's short lived.
yeah.
I love, again, this pointing this out that it has this tolerance for maritime exposure, which in my mind is one of the harshest exposures for a plant. And so you can use white willow in the most critical crisis states and down the continuum as well. Um, it has a very aggressive, deep, expansive root system. And again, I think willow's one of these extracts works very well right in the moment, and folks can literally feel it in the moment, but over time, building that resilience.
Interesting. So because it has this tolerance to a tough environment, that makes it what did you say?
Well, I think it's excellent in that extreme state of crisis, and
Crisis.
um,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, if we looking at, again, Shelton's numbering thing, it's the two trigrams that I'd link with it are Lake and Thunder. And Thunder is about, that extreme crisis
yeah,
moment, and also, the pioneering element. Thunder just makes a start, and it rules one of the hexagrams called difficulty at the beginning, and the innocent and shock and the arousing. So it's these plants or animals that thrive in the pioneer situations are associated there with thunder, and that chaotic movement that you were describing sort of fits the energy of thunder quite nicely. And then of course you've got lake, which is where they want to grow.
yeah,
So that
yeah,
fits really nicely.
nice. So, looking just at the materia medica here as we close up white willow, is its essence, it has this gathering essence, making sense of all the pieces that someone is juggling. I once had a practitioner say white willow is so good for folks that have too much on their plate. Yet, no, they didn't put any of the things on the plate themselves. Someone else always put it on for them.
Right.
It's a harmonizer for the central autonomic nervous system, and has this ability to harmonize the action of acetylcholine,
Hmm.
It has a sedative effect. So out of these six that we looked at, hops and white willow could instead be taken in the evening to help with sleep. But we have found that even taking it in the morning by shifting the action and the state of the central nervous system from the morning, you're going to get the benefit still for a better sleep. Um, we can give it to children from 6 years because of this concern around aspirin. And
Right.
so we also want to be careful with folks. I'm highly allergic to aspirin, and I do find I react very quickly to white willow. So I think we just need to make sure that's in our notes.
Mm, nice. What can you tell me more about acetylcholine? I'm not sure
It
the
protects dopamine,
right. It's a neurotransmitter, isn't it?
right?
Right. And because I did some research and thunder I relate to mostly to the heart center in human design with the link to Aries and the the heart rules the stomach and the thymus gland as well. And when I was looking into that, I saw that acetylcholine was linked. And so that's really interesting that that's come out and that it has this link to thunder um,
Yeah.
compared to birth,
Oh,
even.
fascinating, Luke.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. Um, hmm. And why do you think that they get overloaded with other people's stuff? Why do they let that happen, do you think?
I think I actually perceive this more as a different state of hops, right? It's an addiction.
Mm.
And and so they allow that to happen to prevent them from to keep
Uh,
them busy enough so they're not
right.
looking at their own stuff.
It's a distraction, but they're more accommodating of others, and that is part of the picture.
Well, and they're in service of others. The hops
Yeah.
that state is so disconnected, they're not in service of others.
And they want to kind of take, they because they need that
Right.
happiness. Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly, Luke. Yeah, it's
yeah,
a very different energy.
yeah.
Although White Willow isn't particularly generous in the spirit of it, right?
Hmm.
It's the care taking because this is caretaking, not caregiving.
Yeah.
Let's
It's
be
like
real.
borrowing trouble sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Yeah. I wonder whether that's a quality of the lake trigram, which is to be more accommodating. And one of the hexagrams in lake that's important is the marrying maiden. That's
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah,
that is all about accommodation.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But to get somewhere, so
Right,
you
right,
go
right,
from a
right,
lower
right.
to
There's
a
a
higher
goal.
status. Yeah,
Yeah, there's an end goal. Exactly. But
yeah.
mm, interesting.
Hmm.
That's actually an interesting picture, the Merry Maiden for Willow.
Yeah, yeah. It's a brilliant hexagram, isn't it?
Hmm. Hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Anything else coming up, Luke?
Um, hmm. Well, I think yeah, with hops, it's the connection to the trigram water is there, which is, more in the I Ching, one of the main hexagrams there is the abysmal. So you're having to experience the abyss in some way
Yeah.
to then come out of it.
Yeah, you have to go down under, right?
Yeah, and that's where cannabis would be as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is interesting. But it also has youthful folly is one of the other hexagrams. So it has it has this interesting dichotomy within it.
So would you see that like as a playfulness?
Yeah, I think that either it could be experienced as a playfulness, or you could experience yourself as being detached from the youthful folly and seeing other people doing it and
Oh,
being, you know,
right. Yeah,
bitter about it, or
sure.
you know, because the feeling at water is of moving away and moving to like those liminal spaces where you're not really connected. You want to connect because it's water, but also you feel that absence of connection quite keenly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has quite an underworld element in the I Ching
Yeah.
with its
I,
associations.
I actually think is a good number of folk that could benefit from hops. I'm not sure they're making their way into our practices, Luke, but
Mm.
at
Yeah,
least we can work with those that do. And I, th I think we're seeing this disconnect in the collective.
yeah.
This feels very much like an extract for the collective right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's a remedy that's really underused in homeopathy as
Okay.
well. You know, we will use cannabis indica, cannabis sativa from that family, but yeah, humulus lupulus, hardly ever. It doesn't have much of a picture, so it's not easy for people to find and prescribe it. So what the picture you've given has really enhanced that materia medica and enhanced the understanding of what
Yeah.
hops could be about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good. Good. So this wraps up these first six central nervous system extracts. And just to include this, all of us hit these all of these states. We all have these states within us. It's a matter of identifying what state is showing up more today. And these particular six have a partner that's a tonic. These are all harmonizers. So as we move through and build resilience, then we can consider a tonic in replace of that for the central nervous system. And we can look at those together at some point. But these are the extracts that anyone that's starting with chemotherapy would choose one. They're also the set everyone should have on hand because we rotate in and out of these states. And then from here, a practitioner, an individual could choose to go on and build out a more complex protocol using autonomic nervous system harmonizers and resilience builders, or you could jump into supporting the elimination system. And so we'll see where our conversations go, Luke, and what is of most interest to you the next time we meet.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for all your input.